Well, the finance minister was outselling his budget to business groups today, emphasizing investments to increase Canadian exports.
We have the most ambitious infrastructure plan in the G7. Canada has 3 oceans. You know, we can go to the Arctic, we can go to the Pacific, we can go to the Atlantic. We have this web of trade agreements. We have preferential market access to 1.5 billion consumers.
The Prime Minister has set a goal of doubling non-U.S. exports over the next decade. And today, the Ministers of Transport and International Trade announced $6 billion to boost trade infrastructure such as rails, roads and ports over the next 7 years. Maninder Sidhu is the Minister of International Trade, and he joins me now. Minister, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, David.
I'd like to get some explanation, if I can, on the news coming out of the Prime Minister's trip overseas, the deal with the UAE. $70 billion is an eye-popping number. Is that $70 billion in direct foreign investment over a set period of time? Help me understand what the value of that actually is to Canadians.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, great question. The UAE is an important partner to Canada. I was tasked with getting the FIPA done with the UAE, our investment and protection agreement back in May. It's something that's been ongoing since 2014, and so I'm happy to drive it across the line with my counterpart from the UAE, Dr. Tani. And so that's a great achievement because it'll help facilitate more investments like the ones you're talking about. $70 billion is what UAE is looking to deploy. And of course, there's many areas of opportunities in energy, in infrastructure, in AI, digital infrastructure. There's so much going on between Canada and the UAE. And so that was one of my first delegations that we brought in. But that's not all. I mean, there are a lot of countries in the world that are now calling Canada to say, what more can we do together? And I just hosted my Saudi counterpart, the investment minister from Saudi Arabia, not too long ago. We were in Malaysia with the Prime Minister a few weeks ago talking to Petronas. Right. As you know, they invested in LNG Canada 1. They're looking to do more here in Canada. You know, it's beyond just the investments. The investments come back to jobs in our country. That first LNG Canada site was 20,000 good-paying construction jobs. When I was there in June, big milestone for our country, first shipment to Asia. I met with construction workers from British Columbia, from New Brunswick, from Alberta. And so, you know, when you look at what this means for Canadians, it's the investments that we need, as the Prime Minister said, $500 billion to build these big major projects. And the news coming out of the UAE is an excellent example of that.
But are you talking about the Emirates investing in, say, the projects of national interest? Or are you talking about them putting in like investment capital for the AI projects, for the energy infrastructure you're trying to build? Is it kind of all of it? I mean, how do you see precisely where is that money directly intended to flow?
From my conversations, they're looking at so many different opportunities. I hosted them during the Calgary Stampede. They were there just a month before that. They're big sovereign wealth funds. And so they're looking at a vast area of opportunities. And you look at what we're doing on AI, on data centers and energy. There's so much, especially look, if you mentioned the major projects office, energy, mining, port infrastructure, the UAE with DP World, they're already invested in our port system here in Canada. And today's announcement, $6 billion for more trade infrastructure is very important because, as you know, David, we've set an ambitious target of $300 billion in non-U.S. exports. You can't do that without adding trade infrastructure capacity, and that's exactly what we're doing. And many of these countries are comfortable, and they're here already on the ground, and they want to do more with Canada.
Okay, but just as a final question, I hope to clarify on the $70 billion. This is not $70 billion committed to specific projects with commercial deals in place. This is a portion of their sovereign wealth fund that they're targeting towards potential investments in Canada. Like, there is still a lot of work to be done here. I'm not mischaracterizing it, right?
Look, absolutely. Look, it's a $2 trillion portfolio that they run, and they've committed $70 billion of that to Canada. And like I said, they've already been here. They've scoped out some of the opportunities. They want to do this with Canada. They want to do more with Canada. And so we need to be able to entertain that. We will be. I welcome more delegations coming to Canada because we're getting a lot of things built, and we need that capital flow to our country.
Okay, so on the trade expansion, it's a $6 billion announcement today. So we can see you're meeting with countries like the UAE, trying to get more sources of foreign capital coming into the country and interested in doing business in the country. But to get the goods out, you need port capacity, rail capacity, and other things. So this $6 billion, what specific projects are we going to see in terms of boosting that export capacity in the next year or so?
Absolutely. Look, you're seeing the reports coming out of the Port of Vancouver, exports to the Indo-Pacific region, fast-growing region, one of the fast-growing regions in the world. They're seeing increased exports. You're seeing the need at airports. You're seeing the need in rail lines. And so you look at the whole ecosystem. It's the ports, but it's also the inland terminals that you need to build out to really relieve some of that congestion. If you look at what we're trying to do over the next few years, $300 billion, you need to be able to add capacity because otherwise shippers will just say shipping rates are through the roof. I don't want to ship to external markets. And so we need to be able to facilitate that trade. And that's exactly what Budget 2025 is doing.
Okay, look, I can understand the impulse and the necessity to diversify away from the United States. But, you were in India recently. The Prime Minister was in the UAE, is now in South Africa for the G20. You know the human rights concerns about some of the countries that we are seeking to do deeper business with, right? There are still members of the Sikh community, for example, here in Canada, getting warnings from the RCMP that their lives may be in danger because of the transnational repression agenda of agents connected to the Indian government. I mean, how should Canadians do this, that we are, as a country now, seeking deeper ties with countries where there are human rights concerns, and, for example, the UAE is being criticized for funding allegedly militia groups in Sudan?
Look, when you look at what this government is doing, Canadian safety, public safety is first and foremost for our government. And you look at what's in Budget 2025, we're putting our words into action. 1,000 more CBSA officers, 1,000 more RCMP officers. In fact, some of those RCMP officers will be there to fight organized crime, fight transnational repression, fight extortion. I think that's very important to note here. At the same time, as you know from the Prime Minister's welcoming invitation to Prime Minister Modi at the G7, there was conversations around transnational repression. What more can we do collectively to keep our communities safe? And so, as you know, there's a law enforcement dialogue happening with India. But at the same time, my job as Trade Minister, we can do two things at once. We can have that dialogue to make sure our communities are kept safe, and we can also have the dialogue on the economy and what more we can do together. And that's exactly the conversations that I had last week in India when I sat down with the Energy Minister, when I sat down with my counterpart, Minister Piyush Goyal, on what more can we do to really scope out opportunities, areas of focus. And so I do believe two things can happen at the same time.
But it seems, Minister, that maybe trade and economic activity would trump the other concerns because you're seeking to escalate trade, and it isn't clear from law enforcement that certainly the other activities have de-escalated here in Canada.
Well, look, that's a work in progress, and our National Security Advisor, Natalie Druin, was there. Our law enforcement agencies are collaborating to make sure that our communities are kept safe. We're making the necessary investments, and so that work will continue, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been very clear about. But coming back to it, I think at a time when we're having serious consequences of policies set by our southern neighbors, we need to be able to diversify as well. And people are calling, they want to do more with Canada, more trade and more investment with Canada. And those are the opportunities that I'm scoping out with various countries around the world.
Okay, well, one last question before we let you go, Minister. Nutrien, the Saskatchewan-based fertilizer giant, it's looking to expand its export capacity for potash. And it wants to do it by building an export terminal in the United States rather than here in Canada. I know that your colleague, Minister McKinnon, has suggested you're going to take steps to change their mind. I mean, what are you willing to put on the table, or are you willing to put anything on the table to get them to reconsider and do their expansion efforts here in Canada?
Yeah, we were very disappointed to learn about that decision taken by Nutrient, but it's important to know, those conversations with the Minister of Transport will continue. But at a time, when you're seeing capital being committed to Canada, whether it's from Malaysia, we were just in Singapore a few weeks ago, sitting down with PSA, one of the largest port operators in the world, with GIC, a big investor. They're looking to do more in Canada. You see what the news that came out of Germany the other day, $1 billion for Lockheed Martin, Canada for, some naval technologies. This is huge. This is a momentum that we're seeing. Of course, there are things that we need to work through, but the momentum and the energy that's building up, I'm seeing it worldwide of people looking to invest in Canada, making deals with Canada. And as the trade minister, my job is to continue to be out there signing those deals, making sure that workers in Canada, those deals are about workers at the end of the day, whether it's energy, whether it's defense, right, aerospace, agriculture. There's so much that the world wants, and we'll continue to be there to make sure we showcase them.
But are you convinced you can change their mind? Just quickly as a final point, because a Canadian company building out export capacity in the United States in the middle of what's going on here on a resource they extract in Canada, that's a pretty bad symbol.
No, and you look back at what we announced today, $6 billion of trade infrastructure funding. Can there be a way to make sure that can help facilitate more exports, more Canadian commodity exports? And that's exactly what this fund will do from today that we announced from Budget 2025, is to make sure that we're adding capacity, make sure we're supporting Canadian commodities to get out to new global markets. And that's very important to know here.
Okay, Minister of International Trade Maninder Sidhu, we're out of time. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
Thanks, David.